Welcome to Startup Different. This week, we're thrilled to welcome Matt Watson. Matt is a serial tech entrepreneur. He has founded and exited 3 startups, including a $150 million exit. Today, he is the founder and CEO of Fullscale and helps dozens of other startups build their products. Today, we'll be getting into scaling a business and what pitfalls to avoid. Let's do it. It's Startup Different.
This is the Startup Different podcast, hosted by successful entrepreneurs and brothers Dave and Chris Sinkinson. We're here to bust startup myths and give you the insights you need to help you reach your startup dreams.
Hello, folks. It's another episode of Startup Different. I'm Dave. He's Chris. And today we have our special guest, Matt Watson. Matt, how are you doing?
How's it going? Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Hey, I was on your show, so it felt very natural to have you come on to ours. And obviously you have a lot to offer, young entrepreneurs, seeing as you've had, 3 different exits, one for $150 million. So obviously you've had quite a bit of success. So I was hoping today we could talk a bit about, obviously your journey and how you got to where you are. And then I'd love to talk about scaling and really what it takes to get your business to that level. But let's start off with you, man. Let's take us back. Let's wind back the clock and hear about your story.
I have to repeat what somebody else told me on my podcast when I asked him the same question. And
Sure.
His answer famously was, "I'm just a guy looking for something to do."
Okay.
Which I
Well,
think
you're doing
was
it
like
really
the best
well.
answer ever for that.
What happens if you really try, like really hard?
Yeah, Matt. Yeah, what if you just really exerted yourself? Would you say you do even better? Like, what's going on here?
But I think it's the key to being a good entrepreneur, right? Is you're looking for problems, you're looking for something to do, you're open-minded, you're out there looking for things, right? I think that's where it starts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're looking you're annoyed by something maybe, or you're just looking to help people. I kind of feel like those are the places where you end up making something meaningful and driving real value. Right?
Well, it depends on if you're the founder who had the idea. You're like, okay, I'm trying to solve this problem. Nobody seems to solve this problem. Like I had a friend that wanted to build custom outdoor cabinets. He couldn't find anybody to build custom outdoor cabinets.
Okay.
So he crazily enough partnered with some Amish group and now builds custom cabinets and sells them online. He was like, okay, I'm going for it. Like I'm going to go start a business doing this thing, right? Like that's how a lot of the best businesses start. And then the way 3 of mine started, I was not that guy. I was the guy, I guess in that example, I was the Amish guy. They came to somebody else and said, hey, can you help me build this thing? And I was the guy that they came to and said, hey, can you help me build this thing? But the point was, I was also looking for something to do. Like I was an entrepreneur. I wanted to do something, but I didn't have the right idea. And it takes both sides, right? It takes the right idea, and then it takes the execution, which we always debate, which is more important.
I'm pretty solidly on team execution being the most important, Chris. I don't know. How do you feel about some of that?
Geez, I don't know. I think at the beginning of our business, I thought me being the software developer, I was like super important. But by the time we got to actually growing it, and he was the one bringing in all the money. So, I kind of feel like at the beginning, maybe, but
but execution isn't just making the product. Execution is also about getting to the market and distribution and all those other important things.
Distribution is way harder than either all of it. Distribution's the hard part.
So let's go through some of your businesses. Tell me, just let's talk about them and let's see what value we can get for our audience here today.
Yeah. So the first company I started was a company called Vin Solutions. I was 22 years old at that time. And again, somebody was taking pictures of cars for autotrader.com or for Autotrader, the magazine back then, and was trying to upload the photos to autotrader.com. And a friend of mine basically connected us because he was looking for somebody to help build software to automate uploading photos of cars to the internet. Like, doesn't sound very complicated, but that's where it started in 2003. But keep in mind, this was 2003. The iPhone wasn't even invented until 2006.
Right.
So like in these days, like people didn't have digital cameras as much, and like it was still early days of that kind of technology. But so that company started and started out with that simple idea. Eventually we built like a lead management system. So if people went and submitted leads for a car, that those leads would come into our system, and then the salespeople could respond to the leads and send pictures of the cars, links to websites, brochures, pricing. It was like a CRM kind of software. That was the first company that I started, and there was a bunch of other stuff that went into that. But that company today is still the number one CRM company in all of automotive. Has
that's awesome.
Well,
8,000 car dealerships or something as customers.
You defined a market, like an entire industry. You basically just took
Yeah.
over.
Yep, pretty much.
That's pretty. You're pretty casual about it, Matt.
I mean,
What are you gonna do?
Just building software, man, having fun.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's number one. What's number two?
So after I was done with that, I was very frustrated from being a very high growth, tech business, right? One of the earlier SaaS companies. Was very frustrated with a lot of how developers supported their apps and did troubleshooting and monitored them, all that. And so I started a company called Stackify, and that was the problem we were trying to solve: is how do we give developers better access to production and all the monitoring and all the things they needed. And that went okay. We ended up having to compete with New Relic and Datadog and all these other companies that turned into giant publicly traded companies. So it was a difficult slog fighting them. But we eventually had a reasonable exit and sold that company to a company called Netrio, which then got acquired by BMC, which is like a big publicly traded company. And then through the process of that's how I actually started Full Scale. I needed to hire a bunch of software developers. I needed to be able to do it in an affordable way, and partnered with a friend of mine that already had some employees in the Philippines, and said, hey, let's set up a little partnership. We'll hire some developers for my company. I'll be a customer of it, and maybe some other people could use that as well. And then over the next 18 months, we hired like 100 people and grew that to like 6 million in revenue in 18 months, which was the fastest any of my companies ever grew, growing a service business.
Hey, one thing that Chris and I have talked a lot about on this show is how easy it is for founders to build apps and automations with no-code tools. One of the most powerful tools out there is called Bubble. But even though Bubble is a no-code platform, it can get a little complicated to do things on your own. And so our sponsor today is an agency that's called Zero Code. That's ZeroQode, which is a top Bubble agency, and that can help you build any web, mobile, or AI application, as well as automate your entire business using no code and AI tools. Zero Code will help you build custom solutions, CRMs, custom dashboards, marketplaces, or internal tools to automate your business much faster and cheaper. However, if you want to try to build on Bubble yourself, Zero Code is also the biggest plugin builder for Bubble, and they have more than 700 plugins. Make sure you check them out. Discover the simplicity and power of no code and AI at zerocode.com. That's Zero Code and code with a Q. And now back to the show. That's fantastic. Chris, I mean, you're the chief nerd officer here. Any burning questions coming off that?
Matt, I have so many questions for you on this, because we tried this, kind of offshoring some of our development at times, and I just never got any good results out of it. And at some point just threw up my hands and said, I'm just going to hire people locally that I can sit in a room with. I just always felt like I was almost like fighting with the offshore people to do stuff. And I just never had a good handle on what they were actually doing. And it just the productivity just wasn't there. Even though the cost was really low, the productivity wasn't there. Have you guys ever heard that? Am I weirdo that I'm the only person that couldn't make this work?
No, not at all. I mean, I've heard all the stories from that to I hired a guy on Upwork, but he really was from North Korea and then held my code ransom. I've heard all the stories and everyone in between.
My goodness.
But fundamentally, if you're good at working, especially with a remote team, it doesn't matter if you're hiring remote locally or remote globally. If you're good at working remote, you have good processes in place, good communication, good with requirements, good with the roadmap, good with all that kind of stuff. It doesn't really matter where they sit if they're good talent, right? If you hire really good quality talent, and there's 90% of software developers are not in the United States. 90% are not in the United States. There's talent everywhere. If you hire really good people, I mean, it absolutely can work, but the quality of talent is also super important. And then all the process, communication, requirements, getting all that kind of stuff is important. There's a lot of companies I also talked to as well, and I don't know if this was probably not your issue, but could have been, where there's a lot of people that have like a really smart CTO, like a really brilliant CTO. And I was kind of this guy.
That wasn't Chris. We're fine.
And I was kind of this guy, but I'm the same guy that hates to manage people. I hate to manage people, hate to do the detail work. I hate doing the requirements, hate working with, all the other developers. I'd rather just do the work myself and like go innovate and build big, complicated things. I don't want to like stop what I'm doing and then go like manage other people. And so a lot of people have that problem.
That sounds a lot like Chris, actually. That's definitely in your category.
Yeah.
Like Chris doesn't, you don't.
Did I call you out, Chris? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just, I'm too picky sometimes, and I really am particular about the way I want things done. And
no, don't say it, Chris.
But no, you pretty much described me there, Matt. So,
that's me too. I'm there. I'm the same guy. We're the same.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of our challenge too. And what I had to learn over time is I had to hire like a VP or a director or somebody that could help deal with that and run the team. And for my other startup, which was called At Capacity, which I just did recently, which was kind of a spin out of a digital marketing company. I hired a project manager, which is really the wrong terminology for this. The new term is product operations. Who basically ran the team. He did all the requirements, made sure everybody was doing their job, doing release schedules, did all that kind of stuff. And I always joked, like, CJ was my boss. Like, that guy was my boss. Like, he ran the team and kept everything going, because, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I hate that part of the job. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. We had a few, I think maybe like a season ago, we had an interview with a friend of mine. His name is Rishi Bahari, and he talks a lot about flow. And one of the things about flow is that, and it's obviously like very specific for developers, because you can get into flow and kind of be hyper productive. But a lot of it is this concept of like downstream effort, which is like do the things that you're naturally awesome at, or that you've gotten really good at, as opposed to the things you're not. And for those other things, find ways to deal with them. So it sounds like that's effectively what you're doing with your businesses. You're kind of putting yourself in the position to be most successful because you're focusing on your strengths, and you're finding other people who their strength is frankly your weaknesses.
And I think that is absolutely true about any kind of founder or leader, right? Like, I think what you just said is really important. It's about doing what you're the most valuable at and delegating the other things. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's actually my problem. And I have a slightly different problem that I think a lot of founders have. I hate to say most, which is having ADHD.
I see.
And when you have some form of ADHD, you're highly addicted to things that are challenging, unique. I can't remember what all the terms are, but it's like unique, challenging, things with a deadline. There's like 5 things. I don't remember what they are. Yeah, but all 5 of them speak to me. And if it's not one of those 5 things, we tend to ignore it, or we don't want anything to do with it. And that's also, I think, part of my drive. Like, I'm driven towards like that creativity. That's one of them too. It's like creativity, unique, challenging, deadlines. There's like one more from what it is, but did I just describe you again?
Yeah, it might be undiagnosed.
If the last one is like you need to wear Amazon Basics t-shirts, then that's Chris basically nailed to the wall there. That's interesting. I never really thought of that as being like a trait that a lot of founders might have, but that does kind of make sense. That actually adds up to me a lot. Like, it's a good description. So
yeah.
So okay, let's talk about the big one, the $150 million exit. Let's ask the $150 million question. How did you get there? What was the difference with that versus some of your other businesses?
So part of it is always. Success is always a little bit of timing and luck. And so this really happened and took off around the like 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe. We sold it. We exited in early 2011. We were in automotive. Chrysler and GM go bankrupt. Ford closes a lot of stores. Mm-hmm. We lived in the exact era from when Autotrader.com basically didn't exist. It was all Autotrader, the magazine, and I always remember that from the grocery stores, to 2011 when we sold ironically to Autotrader.com, and the magazine didn't exist anymore. Like, we lived in that time frame where everything went to digital. Cool. So
good timing, eh?
We were on the cutting edge. Like, we were on that leading edge. And the key to the story here is around 2008, 2009, when all those dealerships are going bankrupt and all that, they constrict all the spending, right? They're not going to spend all this money on newspaper, radio, TV, all that kind of stuff. But what are they going to spend the money on? They're going to spend the money more conservatively on internet, autotrader.com, their website, cars.com, eBay. All the budgets shrunk and everything went to digital. And who had the best product for digital leads? We did. So we had built this great product leading up to that, and we'd had some success. But all of a sudden, we're sitting there, we're at a trade show, I'll never forget, and we find out that GM and Chrysler are going bankrupt, and we're just looking at each other like, what are we going to do? Like, how is this going to affect us? Are we going to lose 20% of our customers? What's going to happen? And from that day on, the phone was ringing off the hook. Like, we couldn't keep up. And I mean, of course, we had an incredible sales team. They did a great job. Like, we did, we did all these other things right. But the market was with us because we were one of the leaders in everything internet.
You were it's like the Jim Collins like return on luck thing. Like, you were in a position to be lucky, right? You had done all the other work. You had been well positioned. You had a good reputation, and then something crazy kind of happens, and you're just ready to go.
And there's a bunch of AI companies that are in that boat right now, like Jasper and these different people that they'd already been doing some stuff with AI, and it just sort of worked, and maybe wasn't all that great. And then ChatGPT comes out and like, hey, let's upgrade and use this thing, and boom, now it's like all of a sudden 10 times better and works.
I was gonna say, now you're a unicorn. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
absolutely.
And those are the ones that were wildly successful that had already been working on it before.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of those, we like to point out startup myths on this show. And I think one of those myths is that, like, multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar companies just like show up in our lives overnight. So it feels like they just kind of come out of nowhere, but that's actually lots of deliberate action and execution and those are things that get them to that position, to get the right bounce, to be in your life all of a sudden. So I think,
but timing is always there's always like some sense of timing, like you time things correctly or incorrectly.
And it's hard because you can't always anticipate something. For us, like, we had a similar moment, like not to the scale that you had, but during the pandemic, we had a product that was like physical safety, right? And then it was like, okay, now nobody can congregate. Okay, so it's like, and we just happened to be in the position where a lot of our apps had like the suffix or prefix safe. Chris had put some time into developing some code around, sort of like health checks and like that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, the governments in most of the jurisdictions in which we were working said, hey, you need to have this information on your people, whether or not they're vaccinated or whatever, all that, all of that COVID stuff, which we don't have to talk about. But then, and then it was like, oh, hallelujah. All of a sudden we were just, you like this expression, getting money hand over fist, that's sort of like just grabbing at it as fast as you can. That was pretty
The phone was just ringing off the hooks, and we were, pushing out updates to apps as fast as we possibly could during that time. And it was wild. So it reminds me of your, Ford and GM, Chrysler going bankrupt, same kind of situation, I think. Yeah.
So let's shift gears for a second, because I think your story is awesome, and clearly you know a thing or two about scaling. And I think that one of the things I want to make sure our audience gets today is some lessons around how to scale their business and how to go from kind of small teams to bigger teams. And so I guess just like starting this off is like, what are some of those like bigger challenges when you're really small to try and get to that next level? So, you think maybe early market adoption, you kind of like cross the chasm a bit. What are some of those big challenges there? And then what did you do, or what do you, especially maybe after company one, company two, like how'd you do it differently? I'm interested in that kind of take.
Yeah, of course. The first thing I think of course, is like product market fit, right? It's trying to figure out, did we build the right product? Do people want this thing? Do they need it? And I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they don't talk to enough customers. They don't talk to customers and get that feedback and validate, is this what people really want? And I honestly made that mistake with Stackify because I thought I was building something for me. And so I just thought I knew better, and I didn't spend enough time talking to people. And then I probably would have done some things differently. Right. So even if you think you know what you're doing, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you've got to talk to the market. You've got to talk to the market and understand what the market wants, because what you think the market wants is not what the market wants. It rarely isn't. Right. So I think understanding the market is definitely one of them. I think next on my list would probably be key hires. Like, most companies always have some kind of struggle, and it doesn't matter what size you're at. Even at full scale today, I've got 300 employees, but I am like a key hire. Like, what is my key hire now? I need to get to the next level. Like, At every level, you end up with some sort of new problem. And in the early days, do you feel like you need like 23 hires because you're trying to do everything?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
That's how it always feels.
Well, and then you end up in a worse position because you've hired a bunch of people and you don't know what the hell they're supposed to be doing. I know, like for us, like we had totally had a couple of misfires till we kind of like, okay, what are we actually hiring for? And we would take parts of our job that we either wanted to step on the gas for, like have more salespeople, because I'm the sales guy. So I was like, I know how to teach people. I figured out how to do this. I know what we have to say, what we have to have in the demo. And it's a question, it's just numbers after that. But we've also had situations where like, man, we should get, it sounds so stupid, but we actually talked about another guy about this in another interview where we're like, we need to get good at marketing. And we're like, so we're going to hire a marketing manager. We try to do it and it's a total disaster because we don't know what the hell we're actually doing when it comes to that. We haven't like tackled that problem well enough yet. Right. So it is kind of challenging to know what you're supposed to hire at what stage. Again, another one of those like sort of timing pieces.
It's
like
difficult.
When is the right time to bring someone on, right?
And you think that like, oh, I'm going to hire this amazing salesperson. So at Stackify, I hired a great salesperson, had the right background, all this stuff. He had sold other dev tools. And I'm paying this guy like $200,000 a year as our new VP of sales. We didn't have a product to sell, but I had a salesperson.
Yeah, you weren't there yet.
Like I kind of mistimed it. I kind of hired him maybe 6 to 12 months before, right? Like all these things are really difficult and they're difficult to time. And especially imagine taking VC money. You're like, well, we have to get the product done. And then we got to hire these 3 people. Then we got to spend all this money. And then we're going to raise the next round. Like trying to thread the needle of the timing of all that is like, sounds like
that's actually a good question. Because we talk about funding a lot and we're not big believers on early funding, particularly for SaaS businesses. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that, because that's one of the things too that I feel like VCs accelerate scaling, the whole get big fast sort of thing. And I just don't know if it always serves that well, at least in SaaS. Like I know there are markets that need money, but what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like the more money you raise, the bigger the bet you're making, right? And the earlier stage you are, you don't necessarily know what you're doing to scale.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, okay, we're going to go raise a bunch of money and we'll figure it all out. But it doesn't work that way. To your point earlier of like, how do we scale the go-to-market strategy? Like, how are we going to sell this thing? Well, I don't know. Well, let's just hire a whole bunch of people. We'll hire the experts. Like, they don't necessarily know either, right? Yeah. And this has been a long battle at full scale. We've tried to figure out, okay, how do we grow sales and marketing at full scale? Well, guess what? Cold calling doesn't work. Cold email doesn't work. Digital marketing doesn't work. I had these problems at Stackify. Like, software developers don't answer the phone. They all use ad blockers. They don't want to talk to people, right? Like every business is totally different in how you do the go-to-market strategy and how that sort of that part of it works. And until you figure it out, like there's nothing to scale. Like there is nothing to scale until you really, really, really figure it out. And it's probably one of the hardest things to outsource to somebody else to figure out as well. Like as a founder, the job is always sales is like the first job of the founder. And until you figure out how to actually do it and create a repeatable process and scale it, it's kind of a waste of time to go raise a whole bunch of money. And even at full scale, we've kind of figured out like it's still just impossible to do.
Right.
Like some things are just impossible to scale that way.
Just leaves you, if you're a guy just trying to keep yourself busy, it seems like a lot of headache for a questionable amount of gain for some of the stuff. So
some types of businesses, the product is sold on relationships and trust, like especially big enterprise products. And it's just really difficult you can't throw a lot of money at that because money doesn't like create relationships and trust very well. Yeah. Unless you hire people that just happen to have those relationships and trust.
100%. So let's just kind of recapping here a little bit, because I got one more thing I want to ask you on kind of you personally, which is, so you start all these businesses, now you're just trying to do something, you're trying to keep yourself busy, but what about like burnout? I mean, like this is a lot of work, like having operated one business. The thing that intimidates me the most, and Chris, I don't want to talk for you here, like, but Chris, are you intimidated by starting another business? Like,
we did emergency management software, and it was certainly intense at times, dealing with law enforcement, first responders and things like that. There were some very intense moments. So I think I would definitely start another business, but I maybe avoid anything with the word emergency, safety in the name
people
of it.
care though. If you're paying, like if they're paying you, they're going to be intense, right?
Yeah, that's true. Good point. So maybe it's just, it is what it is.
So I guess, Matt, to you though, how did you it's so intense to do this, how are you not burnt out?
So I don't think I want to do it again.
Okay.
I would rather acquire something and grow it than to start from zero. Like that 0 to first 1 million in revenue is incredibly difficult, incredibly hard. And a lot of people, it can take years to figure that out, get the product, get product market fit, figure out how to sell the thing. All of that is a nightmare versus I bought out my business partner in full scale. So I own all of it now instead of half of it. And it's so much easier to I'm going to buy you out and just go grow this thing. It's so much easier to grow something that already exists than to start from scratch. But I have a couple other answers about your burnout.
So Chris said he totally should have done that, but anyway, he's a class act. Anyway, it's fine.
But I have a couple other answers for you about the burnout question.
Yeah.
So after I sold Stackify, I had about 6 to 12 months. I didn't do much, and honestly, I felt lost. I felt totally lost. What do I do with my life? Part of what I described earlier, I have an ADHD, right? I need a challenge. I need to be creative. I need a problem to solve. I need a purpose in life. I was lost. I wouldn't necessarily call it burnout, but I was just lost.
I'm just looking at Chris right now. You continue to describe
I'm
Chris
sorry, Chris.
on such a consistent basis. Can we zoom in on Chris's face somehow?
This is me right now, Matt. Sorry, the podcast and the book and stuff like that ain't exactly doing it. So I
get it.
I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. I was lost. And then conversely, after buying out my business partner 9 months ago, over this last 9 months, I've struggled with burnout a couple of times. And a lot of it was just frustration of things. I had a director of marketing that was driving me crazy that I needed to fire, and I should have fired them more quickly. Different things like that just ate at me. Just having the wrong team, needing to make some changes, all that kind of stuff was just eating and eating and eating at me. And finally, I've made those changes or just gotten more used to what I'm doing and whatever. But we all go through it. I've been there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess as a last word here, because we're just running up on time, Matt, we like to ask people about a startup myth. I mean, we've kind of addressed a few during the show. So if you want to go with the myth, that's cool. If there's a last word you want to leave us with for some of the folks in the audience today, that's also cool. But what do you got to say to the folks at home?
All right. So my best advice as a founder is for your company and even personally, it's not important to be the best at what you do. It's more important to be the best known at what you do.
Interesting.
Is that
kind of like a version of the best marketed product, wins versus the best product kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, the best known beats the best every time, right? You don't know the best plumber that lives in your town, but you know the one who runs the most ads, and you see their truck drive by.
Nice.
You know the one who's the best known. You do not know the best plumber. You will never meet him.
Yeah, probably not anyway.
Probably not.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
that's really insightful. Yeah,
cool.
Best known.
Well, the best known. All right, so you heard it here for first, folks. Be the best known of whatever it is your business does. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time, folks. That's another episode of Startup Different. Please, as always, rate the pod. And next week we'll do a deep dive on this interview, and we are looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Nicely done. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so the almighty algorithm can help others find us. Want more from Startup Different? Check out our book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. Follow us on social. We're big on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check us out at startupdifferent.com. Special thanks for this episode to Graham and our friends at Toronto Podcasts. Visit them at torontopodcast.ca. See you next week.